After 3 years of work, our follow-up to the Meat Eater Fish and Game Cookbook is here. It's the Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, campfire, and camp stove. Here is your book for everything that's best cooked or eaten outside. From grilling to open fire cooking to Dutch ovens to smokers to barbecue to backpacking meals to how to pull off the perfect fish fry, with pit stops along the way for lessons about Ice Age cooking methods and the best 5 ways to construct a cooking fire you can be proud of. And of course, we're focusing on wild game and fish here with over 100 recipes, including stuffed venison burgers 3 ways, wild duck with ahi verde sauce, a jerky made with cola, a gin and tonic made with fire-charred lemons, and grilled frog legs made with a sticky sweet sauce. This ain't your normal cookbook, so be prepared to be surprised. Get your copy now. For more info, visit themeateater.com or buy it wherever books are sold.
He's also not wearing socks inside those work boots because he used his socks to wipe his ass.
She literally looked like she was going to have a heart attack because this was her prized little poodle.
If I had used my 10-inch auger, your Vexler would be gone.
I live in Washington State, and we have hogs for steelhead. I catch them all the time and avoid game officers while I take a picture of them and put them back.
Bent! Good morning, degenerate anglers, and welcome to Bent, the fishing podcast that cooked up a story and dropped the 6 of you in a meat grinder, leaving you wondering what happened to it because it used to be a podcast you could trust when asking for detailed directions to fishing spots. I'm Joe Cermelli. Miles, are you with us?
I'm Miles Nolte. Was that a Predator reference?
Yes, it was a Predator, and it was an obscure one because really it's just my roundabout way of saying.
No, I didn't.
It's my roundabout way of saying the theme for this week's show is Carl Weathers.
Ladies and gentlemen, Carl Weathers.
So the theme, all right. You threw me, but the theme sounds a little questionable, and as was the yeah, it sort of. I mean, no more questionable than the reference you started with. But you know what, dude? I'll play.
Good.
I'm in.
Play.
I'm down. I'm just thinking about this now. I would say though that for the record, I probably would have skipped the Saturday Night Live clip that you started with. I think I would have used this one instead.
Who's he?
His name is Carl Weathers, and he's my new acting teacher. And Lindsay, he's teaching me all these valuable life lessons.
Okay, touche. I love the Arrested Development angle you took there. So does this mean you're in? Does this mean we're gonna do a Carl Weathers show? Because I just want to clarify something to our listeners. Like, we don't think about this shit weeks in advance. Often the theme, it's sometimes hours before we record it. So this is not some. I was putting this together and I was like, Carl Weathers, that's the theme.
Dude, like I said, I'm in. If nothing else, I'm very, very invested in seeing exactly how you're going to go about trying to pull this one together. So
okay.
Yeah, I'm in. I'll play.
I take that as a compliment from you, man. And I feel we can both appreciate the challenge of loosely basing a fishing podcast episode on like a roided out 80s movie star. What could possibly go wrong?
Maybe this wasn't such a damn good idea after all.
You know I respect a writing challenge and a feat such as this, and I wish you nothing but luck. But before I even let you really get started, I'm going to sidetrack you because that's what we do to each other. And I'm going to tell you that a story. I once had a neighbor, like when I was in my 20s, and this neighbor had a golden retriever named Action Jackson.
Oh, no shit. Cool.
Yeah, true story. And so Action Jackson, of course, being the cult classic Carl Weathers film from 1988 that is so over the top, it's almost a parody of the genre of the action movie. It's so bad, it's good. I don't know if it's good, but it is what it is. Like you that was when action movies peaked and then went over the top.
Agreed.
And that's the clip that we just played also came from that movie, for the record. And I personally have always thought that Action Jackson might have been the best dog name
it's good
of all time.
It's up there.
Particularly, it was like this huge golden retriever that was always standing in the backyard barking at people, and I was like, "You have the perfect name." And I'm just going to point out that I might be foreshadowing some things you're going to bring in later in the show. You're welcome.
Yeah, I see what you did there. That was good. But look, I don't need luck. I'm going to do Carl Weathers episode here today. It's done. It might not be good, but it's done. We're committed. Anyway,
it's happened.
It's happening. If I had to peg a real theme, maybe a sub theme, like a sub Carl Weathers theme to this week's show, I guess it could be perseverance, which that harkens us back to that old weekly word of yours, perseverate.
Yeah, I liked that one, though you were not such a fan when I remember I first recorded that. I was like, what do you think? You're like, not so sure. So I'm glad to hear that you came around on that one finally. And you admit that I was right.
I have.
You're welcome.
I have, but probably because it just suits my own needs this week. So, this week you're going to have to persevere through a few more Carl Weathers references, whether you like them or not. The smell of rank coolers, that's something else. What else we got? A lure that might cause permanent ligament damage in your shoulders, and the stereotypical inshore Cabela shopper are all things.
Yep, we got things coming. Before we get there, though, you will have to persevere through one other thing. We're leading off with I don't know, dude. I never know how to describe him. A most unhumble.
That's good.
Yet phenomenal angler. Particularly when it comes to walleye or anything in the Great Lakes. I would go so far as to call Ross arrogant.
Yes.
I think that's fair. He's an arrogant man, which, that's a quality you might want in a fishing guide. I'll say that too. I think it's good. I want to, like, if I'm hiring the guide, I want the guy who's like overconfident that we're going to catch fish, not the guy who's like, I don't know, maybe.
That's true. That's good. Yeah, you're right.
So anyway, Ross Roberts is back this week for the Smooth Move segment. Our favorite time to let guides and captains tell humorous stories or just bitch about things clients do, whatever they feel like telling us. And Ross is going to tell us about his favorite cocktail recipe that marries whiskey before sunup with lapdogs and atrial fibrillation.
Why did you do that? Why? Why did you do that, Karen? Oh my God.
Joining us today on Smooth Moves, one of my all-time favorite people. That's a bold statement. I know. I'm seeing him on a screen right now in the look of shock. Captain Ross Robertson, Big Water Fishing. How are you, my friend?
Friend, right now I'm just overwhelmed. I feel like...
I feel overwhelmed because you showed up wearing a hat that says Smooth Moves.
Yeah, that is just like this. Did you do that on purpose? Was that thought through or just a complete accident?
I'm just a human train wreck, so probably not. But Smooth Moose suspension seats. Seriously.
You know what? I like it so much. I'll let you plug the sponsor because I'm like, man, he sat down with this. This reminds me of the time I forced you to wear a hat that says "Get Over Yourself." Do you remember that? That was good too.
Yeah.
Anyway,
so
remind
on
us
brand.
again.
I'm just saying that's on brand in more ways than one. But yeah.
Yeah, I have no problem with it. People, it's just funny. Like people think me and you hate each other. It's funny.
It is true. When I only kind of hate you.
Dislike you.
Yeah,
I
can tolerate you is the thing. That's
tolerable.
It.
Yeah, you've actually said my semi-tolerable friend because I remember things too.
I referred to you as that many times. My semi-tolerable friend Ross Robertson. Semi-tolerable friend Ross Robertson. Do remind the listeners how many years you've got in now guiding for the Wallies there on Lake Erie.
I don't know exactly, but it's either 21 or 22.
So I'm very excited to finally get a Smooth Move story from you because I know there's many. I've heard many, but you got one shot. So hit us with the best, man. What do you got?
I got a lot of them. Some of them we probably couldn't talk on here because you guys are not PC. But let's just be honest, some of these things ain't meant for nowhere. You can hit the record button. But when people are drinking on the boat, it's a no-go for me. I'll drink one or a dozen with you, but on lake, that's just a no-go. So I'm out there fishing, and I get a guy that I realize from the time we took off till the time we basically set up, this dude is hitting a flask, and he is snookered. So I basically canceled the day, kind of make a little bit of an excuse up just to, downplay
cut him
things
short. So you cut your day short because he was bad enough.
By 90%. Because this dude, he almost knocks me out of the boat as soon as we're getting ready to set up. It's game over. Like this is a bad deal. I'm sure my insurance guy's cringing right now. So anyhow, I burn them back in, and it was middle of the week, and so there's like nobody really around. I tie up at the dock. It's on a river. kind of useful information for a second. So I literally run to get my truck. I turn around and look, and this guy's like, because it's not that far away. He is untying the ropes, and he's like, all clear. And the boat is now like banging and sliding down this river. Thankfully, there's
He untied you from the dock of the ramp.
Yeah, on a river. On a river. Now, it's not good any place, but it's really bad in a river. And it's also middle of the week. There's nobody around. Like, I try to use launches where there's nobody around, right? So fortunately, there was a courtesy dock that's, I'm going to say 100 and some feet long. I literally run. I mean, it was like a movie deal. I run like Forrest, jump on the boat, literally almost breaking rods in the front deck. I get in the thing, get it under power, and tie it back up. As you can imagine, mega pissed at this point and about really done with life. So the other guy who is not snookered, who's one of my regular guys and still fishes with me, he's like, I already know, he knows I'm about ready to go ape mode on this deal. So now I get it and I tell him, hey, listen, meet me at top of the parking lot. We're going to get your stuff out of the boat. I'm going home. Game over. They're trying to take me to breakfast, lunch, or whatever. I'm like, done. Pay me. Because I don't want to go to jail. I'm going to go home instead. So I'm top of the deal here and I'm waiting. I can't find him. I don't see him. And now where he had to park was down 100 yards away or something like that. And I'm looking. I don't see him. I don't see him coming. So I'm like, screw it. I'm going to drive my boat and truck in the car parking. Which is, there's not really room to turn around to do any of that, but I'm just like done over with this. So I drive down there and there's a little car in front of me, which I almost go ape shit on. And then I realize it's like some 80-year-old husband and wife. And I realize then that the wife is out and she's standing in front of her car. So I get out now and I'm in a place that's like a semi in a school parking lot. Like, I mean, logistically, this doesn't all work. And I look out and this woman, it looks like she's having a heart attack. She is just like got her hand over her mouth. Oh, what's going on? Well, I look down and here's my dude laying flat on the ground in front of their car. And I'm like, did he get smoked by the car? I mean, what's going on? And then I realize like he's got this thing and he sits up and he's petting this dog. But all you can see is of Rufus here is just this little tiny, it looks like a lollipop in him because his arms are so big.
He's like Lenny in it from Of Mice and Men.
Absolutely. He has this dog in a death grip, but doesn't even realize it because he's that snookered, right? And this woman is like, oh my God. And I've got to basically go up there and be like, dude, let go of that dog before I kick you in your dome. And because this guy could kick the shit out of all of us. I mean, he's a big dude, even though he's old.
Wait, hold on. I gotta check. Was the dog okay?
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
what happened to Rufus?
Apparently, I mean, I didn't do a vet check or anything on it, but he went home. He got in the car with a nice little old lady. She did not have a heart attack. I think that was probably the biggest thing in this whole deal because she literally looked like she was going to have a heart attack because this was her prized little poodle.
I gotta say, man, for all the ways that this story could have gone, it really ended as well as it could. You did the track star sprint and leap, got your boat back, didn't take anybody out in the parking lot. The old lady didn't die and the dog was okay. And best of all, you didn't get into fisticuffs with your client. I really couldn't have seen this ending any other way that was positive. So I'd say that's a really good one.
I like positive stuff. I mean, there are a few that my
you just exude positivity, huh?
Yeah, there's a few that my lawyer and my insurance agent suggested we not talk about. So, I mean, I feel like that this is good.
So, just in case that one shook you to the core, in case you were on the edge of your seat worrying about the well-being of Rufus the poodle, just in case.
That was a messed up story, man.
It was. So, let's heal. Here's Carl Weathers to sing you back to a happy place.
What about a rainbow? Have you ever noticed how you feel inside when a rainbow's in the sky?
I do not feel healed. I do not feel put back together. I do not feel soothed. Like, of all the Carl Weathers clips, like, you could have gone Rocky. Mm-hmm. You could have gone Predator. You could have gone Happy Gilmore, Hurricane Smith, and you went with that. That was where you went.
You know why? Because I stumbled onto it accidentally. And just, first of all, we don't give enough credit to 90s SNL monologues. And just based on watching Carl's 90s SNL monologue, I'm sure that was a horrible episode of the show. Like, it was a terrible monologue. I feel like they might have been hard up for people at the time. But I love the obscurity of it. That's why That's why I chose it.
And that's where I do have to give you credit, because I'm giving you full points for not being obvious. That was not where I would have gone at all. And so credit there. And you know what? I'm going to thank you, because you kind of teed me up, because the book that I'm going to drop in this week's installment of Frickin' Philistines is also not the obvious choice, though it is one of the best essay collections I've read in a long time.
What's a Philistine?
It's a guy who doesn't care about books or interesting films and things.
Then I'm a Philistine.
I love a good essay collection. It's kind of like the Tinder of literature. Reading a single essay doesn't require much commitment. You can grab a cup of coffee, share a few minutes of conversation, and then get on with your day. Or maybe you're having a good time. Coffee turns into lunch, and you set the book aside after several hours, already looking forward to the next date. Or coffee rolls into lunch, after which you lose track of time completely, take the book to bed with you, and devour the whole thing. I appreciate options. Good chance I'll review many essay collections, but I'm starting out with one that's kind of underground. Fish Like You Mean It by David Zoby. I'll be the first to admit that the title leaves something to be desired, and the copy could have used a more stringent editor. But if you can set those two criticisms aside, you'll get to experience one of the best fishing books you've never heard of. The book spans most of Zoby's life, a series of vignettes held together by two strands: fishing and the attendant strange characters he attracts. From his Lebanese family on the Virginia coast to his contemporary itinerant ramblings in Homer, Alaska, Zoby collects a cast of people too eclectic to be entirely fictional, and fishing tales too humble to be made up. That humility is really my favorite aspect of Zoby's writing. Too many authors, especially those of us who write about conquest pursuits like fishing and hunting, use the space between covers to argue their dominance or show off superior skill. You'll find none of that here. Mostly, you'll find a person trying to make sense of his own major tragedies and minor successes through fishing. His family's immigrant shame, the decay of his hometown after the closing of shipyards, the sting of giving away fishing secrets to sell tackle, a disappointing career, a doomed relationship, a series of canine companions that just never last long enough. It sounds depressing. I know. But it's not. Zoby gets his readers through all that heaviness the same way he gets through it. Exceptional fishing stories featuring fascinating supporting characters. Though, to be fair, he throws in some great duck hunting stories too. Every time the narrative starts to feel like really sad, you're transported to a Wyoming river or an Alaskan beach with a rod in your hands and a dog at your heels waiting to chase salmon or trout or seals or sticks. Anyone who has ever felt fishing become escapism and perhaps wondered at what point it tips from being a healthy outdoor pursuit to a self-destructive avoidance tactic will relate to this book. But it's not all deep-water navel-gazing. Zoby also turns his razored critiques outward from time to time, as in this section of an essay titled, At the Cabelas. The story of Cabela's is one of the true rags-to-riches tales woven into the fabric of Americana. In 1961, Dick Cabela was working at his parents' furniture store in Nebraska when he accompanied his father to Chicago with the purpose to buy more inventory. In a water-damaged warehouse, he stumbled upon some cheap, hand-tied flies from Japan. He knew they were too cheap to pass up, so he bought several thousand. His first ad ran in the Casper Tribune. Only one person answered. His next ad ran in Field and Stream. It read, 5 hand-tied fishing flies, free, 25-cent postage and handling. This ad did the trick. Dick and Mary Cabela spent their free time filling out orders on their kitchen table. They collected the names and addresses of their first customers on recipe cards and sent them future offers. Regrettably, these were the first catalogs, the birth of a revolution. The flies and the postage to send them back to customers only cost the Cabelas 14 cents, so they made a profit of 11 cents on each order they filled. There really were no free flies. There never were. This was the humble beginning of America's biggest outdoor gear company, the world's foremost outfitter we know today. While wandering around in search of the canine department, I found an Alaskan moose. He was a full body mount. His paddles were the color of maple syrup. The hide seemed large enough to project a movie on his flanks. He was standing in a tumbling stream beside faux boulders, and, to my amazement, there were actual rainbow trout in the stream, weaving in and out of the moose's spindly legs. I peered over what passed as a beaver dam and looked down at the fish. They were large for rainbows, some of them pushing 20 inches or so, the kind of fish you catch on the North Platte in March if you can stand the wind and the cold. The tannic smell of the creek, the raw, exposed scent of rot and fish, struck me as original. A large man grazing on peanut brittle he had just purchased leaned over beside me and looked down too. "Those are some nice uns," he said. A bit of brittle fell from his mouth and the trout scrambled for it. The spell was broken, just like that. But that is the danger of simulacra. The experience itself, just walking into the store, has become the outing, the goal. Going to the Cabelas replaces the need to climb a mountain or find a grosbeak in your binoculars. A trip to Cabela's, any Cabela's, does not ask that you risk mosquitoes or a night on the uncomfortable ground. It only asks that you shop, drowsily, impulsively. It asks that you sign up for the in-store newsletter, a Cabela's credit card. It asks that you fill your carts and your arms with products, that you haul them away happily and contented, as if the adventure is within these vaulted showrooms, not some other place without. You won't find this book at your local bookstore, unfortunately, so you'll have to turn to the Cabela's of the book world, good old Amazon, to get a copy. Once you get past that unpleasantness, though, I think you'll only be disappointed when you find yourself staring at the back cover, wishing there was another essay to read.
I gotta admit, no lie, that book sounds incredible. And you did pick the perfect passage, because I can relate to that so much, and it's so terrible that he's right. You know what I'm saying? Like,
oh, yeah.
When the Cabela's first
it.
opened up out here in Pennsylvania, people set up campers in the parking lot. Like, they came for the weekend to the Cabela's instead of taking the camper into the wild. Absolutely. Yeah, and every time I'd go out there, there'd be another restaurant built up or another shopping center. It's just like all these things sprouted around that, and you just come spend the weekend at the Cabela's. That's what you did. I could never figure it out. Kind of unrelated. My wife visited that Cabela's with me exactly one time, and her takeaway was that she had probably never walked through as many fart clouds in a single day before. That was what she took away from Cabela's.
Well, peanut brittle and hot dogs are not good for the digestion.
No.
That's what I'll say. And man, like Dave nailed it on that one. And I full disclosure, he's someone who I call an acquaintance. I think he's a really good guy in addition to being a good writer. But that is both a depressing and completely accurate passage. And I feel like one that all of us sort of as an outdoor community need to marinate on for a minute. And all of you out there should buy and read that book for sure. It's just good. And Zobi, I think, is a sorely underrated writer. I used to edit his stuff when I worked at Gray's Sporting Journal, and it was like one of those ones when I saw his name in my email, I would know something good was coming, and I wasn't going to want to beat my head against the wall, and I always look forward to it.
Oh, I can see why, man. And I got to give you credit. You are the king of finding like this sort of underground dudes that write really, really great stuff. And this is a great example. Sadly, though, I'm probably never going to read Fish Like You Mean It because I don't do well with dogs dying.
Well, there's not like, I should clarify, it's not like a dramatic dog death is a part of the book. It's just that, like, you see a series of dogs, like once he's fishing with one dog, and then in the next story it's a different dog, and like, okay.
So he doesn't talk, he doesn't detail the dying of dogs?
No, this is not like a Merle's Door kind of situation.
Okay, I may read it, now that I know that, okay? Because I can't do look, I can watch Carl Weathers' arm get torn off and feel nothing. But dogs dying is my kryptonite. So hopefully you've not conjured any kryptonite that will block me from emerging victorious in this week's current events battle. Let's do some fish news.
Fish news!
That escalated quickly.
All right. I just have one very tiny baby shout out this week. I have to do this. You remember last week we did the awkward moments in angling with Alex Reed as a young boy? And he was
how could I ever forget? Yeah.
He was posing with the bluegill after just having pissed his pants.
Yeah.
He wrote in after last week's show to just let me know that same exact day he also took his first dump in the woods. So in that photo that we ran, he's also not wearing socks inside those work boots, those little work boots, because he used his socks to wipe his ass. So that's like a little addendum to the pee pants awkward photo.
Wow.
That's all I got. I'm like, the world needs to hear that. So that's
Alex had no idea what he was getting into when he allowed us into his personal history.
But he loved it. He's like, thanks for the 5 minutes of fame. Also, I shit in the woods and wipe my ass with my socks. So he fed that. He didn't have to offer that up, but he did. And I appreciate it.
Nope. The dude is a masochist. I can't have any housekeeping after that. We've soiled the whole segment.
But I'm bummed.
We are going to do news just a little differently this week. We're not like totally stepping out. It's going to feel familiar, but we're going to switch it up a little bit. So Joe and I, we're each going to do just one single story. And then after that, we're going to bring in a special guest who's going to cover a more in-depth piece of news for us. And that's a piece of news that neither Joe nor I wanted to have any personal involvement with whatsoever, for reasons that will become clear when you hear it. Just so you know.
It's a little change up, but we consider doing this more. It's not bad to have somebody on every once in a while, so we're trying something here. Try it with us.
Particularly people who know more than we.
Correct.
But despite all that, despite the changes, this is still a competition, and neither Joe nor I know what the other ones bring into the table. And at the end, our illustrious audio engineer, Phil, will pick a winner. Just this week, he'll have 3 options instead of 2. And Joe, you got the lead off this week, but you only have one shot at it.
One shot.
So you better be bringing the goods, man.
Yeah. Well, I hope it's one of the way, like, the story's not amazing, but the talking points after the debate it brings up, I think is good. It's something everybody can get behind. So this is from forthewin.com. That's part of USA Today. Headline: Angler breaks 50-year-old catfish record. Catch stirs controversy. So what happened here? Back in September, North Carolina angler John Stone caught himself a 23-pound, 5-ounce channel cat, which that is a large channel catfish. I mean, I don't care who you are. 23 pounds, 5 ounces is a really good fish. And he filled out all the proper paperwork and submitted it for state record. Now, here's the thing. The previous record was 23 pounds, 4 ounces, and it has stood since 1970. All right, so 50 years. But late this January, the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission certified Stone's catch. And here's the fun part. Not only has it beaten the 50-year record by a mere ounce, it was caught in a private pond. And as you might imagine, people are going ballistic over this, especially since that previous 50-year record came from a public lake. So when NCWR posted a photo and announced the certification on its Facebook page, all hell broke loose in the comments. And some were supportive, but most of them, man, are calling it out as straight up cheating, claiming, Stone grew the fish, calling it a farmed catfish, and so on and so forth. Now, it's a little more here to add another layer of drama. Another story on a different site about this catch notes that Stone is an at-large wildlife commissioner. So people are even more pissed off that he'd even try and have this certified because of that position. And I looked at all the stories related to this that popped up in the news feed, and I can't seem to find one where Stone is quoted or defending himself or anything like that. But frankly, if you really stop, he doesn't need to, right? Because regardless of how you feel, North Carolina certifies fish from private water. You might not like it, but there's no shadiness or wrongdoing on their end. As far as they're concerned, they don't care what kind of water it came out of. And in my opinion, I certainly understand the frustration here. But I also think it's fair to say there are so many details that we don't know. So it's hard to make a legit judgment call. I mean, just as an example, right? If in fact Stone has been hand feeding this cat for years in a private pond, essentially growing it, yeah, that's totally lame and stupid. But nobody has made an official claim of that yet. Now, on the flip side, a lot of people have private water, lots of them, right? So if I bought property with a pond on it and it coughed up, say, a state record bass, why would that not count? I haven't manipulated those fish or fed them. It was just there. Maybe it was an old farm pond that's been there since that was farmland, and now I bought my McMansion in North Carolina. There's a huge bass in there. But what people are saying is that it's not right to claim a record from water that not everyone can access. And that's certainly a very gray area. And there's no battle here. It's basically just people spouting off. But it's a gray area, at least in terms of legality. Ethically, different story based on the case, right? And just to put a personal touch on it, for years, I belonged to a private trout club in North Jersey. And the fish there, we fed them with automatic deer feeders.
Right.
Just spit out the food, right?
To
keep them in the stretch.
Yeah.
Privately stocked. And it was what it was. I used to call it the land of make-believe. And it was like somewhere to get your jollies in the middle of the winter. And I'm fairly confident I broke the New Jersey state brook trout record at least twice many years ago, right? Now, technically, I could have weighed that fish in and claimed that record. And honestly, in a way, it would have been more legit maybe than a private pond fish, because theoretically that fish was free to leave our private section of stream and go wherever it wanted. The food kept it there, but that fish could have went wherever it wanted. And it could have easily ended up caught in a public stretch of that same stream. But I would have literally beaten my own ass if I ever even thought about doing that.
It wasn't on the Little J, was it?
No, it wasn't on the Little J.
You weren't part of that club, I hope.
No, this is Little J's Pennsylvania.
I thought you said sorry, I heard Pennsylvania.
No. This is North Jersey. No, this is not the Little J debacle. But to me, I was like, I was holding this fish going, God, what a lame loser move that would be. But it would have counted. The state wouldn't have said you can't do that. And the irony in that is if that fish did leave that stretch, our stretch, and get caught by some 8-year-old kid 5 miles downriver, I would have been like, good for him. Get that record. Yep. You know what I mean? So it's there's so much debate there. I get the frustration, but it's hard to say, you know?
It's the thing, or the reason that we're both kind of, I think, responding to this the same way is that we just don't care that much about the record thing. Like that's not, and I'm not trying to put this out as a judgment on the people who do, because I get that a lot of people, they augment their enjoyment of fishing by putting particular goals on themselves and working through those with constraints, which is what records are all about, right?
Yeah.
Like this size fish on this line, that's what makes it fun for me. Cool. You do that. That's not how I approach joy of fishing, right? So this becomes like a pretty academic and kind of, well, not a total entirely subjective debate. It was legal. He can do it.
Right.
Right? Should he have done it? Now there's where you can go round and round and round. But can he do it? Absolutely. He did it. He can. So get over it if that makes you mad.
And you're 100% right. If you really like peel the layers away of why there's debate here, for you and I, you're correct. I don't give a damn about record fish. Like the only way, I don't really care about a state record fish. I'll even take it a step further, and I'm going to annoy some people that are listening to this right now. But, you know, a lot of fish just have citations too. Like citation catches. I don't know if that's a thing out west, but out here, it's like in New Jersey, as an example, it's like they'll say if you want a pickerel citation for the year, the fish has to be over 23 inches. Like they designate all these different fish, all these different lengths, and if you catch one and send them a photo, like you get a citation to put on your wall. Dude, there are people who have like hundreds of citations. It's like, damn, dude, you need that bad? Like they post on Facebook, it's like, another citation white perch. Another got 4 citation pickerel. Who
Those
gives
are
a
people
shit?
who still have all their like ribbons and trophies from high school sports. That's what I'm going to say.
So like, dude, the citation, I'm sorry, that's like the bottom of the barrel. For me to care about a record, it would have to be something so mind-blowing. Like I would have to catch the next world record striped bass or something like really coveted.
Something storied. Yeah.
Line class records, I'm sorry. Don't care.
No, and I mean,
So-
we talked about that we dug into that culture when we reviewed Monty Burke's new book. And so
Yeah.
this also makes me, you brought up something that made me think of a previous book of Monty Burke's, which was Sow Belly, which was all about, there was a whole
Yep.
chapter in there about
Oh,
the
yeah,
guy who's
great book.
trying to grow
Yes.
the world record largemouth bass, like intentionally and with a lot of chemistry and science. Like, what do you have your private pond for? I'm trying to grow the record largemouth, watch it grow, and then catch it and break the record.
Yep.
Also legal. Is it anything I
Yep.
want anything to do with? No. Has the guy ever succeeded? No. But
No.
that's sort of the extreme extent that these things can go to. And unless we change the rules somewhere and say, like, private ponds don't count, it only works on public water, then this debate continues to be just kind of moot.
You're not going to do that.
Right.
You're not going to do that.
Right.
So we don't really know the full story here, but either way, like when it comes down to it, he didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
deal with it. I think it's lame, but deal with it.
My story actually ties into that because it's also about a large fish that will annoy the crap out of quite a few people listening. So from my news story this week, we're checking in with Lakeville, Minnesota, and I just got to say really quick, that's got to be the most literal town name in the entire state. It's kind of like how they named my adopted home state Montana, which means mountains in Spanish. Or there's a town in Idaho called Teutonia that sits right in the shadow of the Grand Teton. Anyway, So this story comes to us from Northland Outdoors, and it comes by way of listener Caleb Prater. I don't know. I'm butchering it. But either way, thank you, Caleb. Thanks for sending it along. Before I get into this, though, Joe, I feel like I have to give you personally a trigger warning because the following story may cause you extreme frustration, anger, envy, a general sense that the world is a deeply, deeply unfair place. So if you need to prepare yourself in some way to receive the information I'm about to impart, do so now, or just take off your headphones or whatever you got to do for the next couple minutes.
Is it about like Clackcraft giving away 100 boats for free to people or something like that?
It's not. It might be worse than that for you. So, I mean, if you're going to stick around, just deep breathing. That's all I got to say.
All right.
So this story is about John, and there are going to be a lot of butchered last names here, everybody. Just deal with it. The story is about John Kuznia and his buddy Ben Sarian. John and Ben went out ice fishing a couple weeks ago on Lake Charlie, where John keeps a permanent ice house in the winter. John owns a cabin on nearby Lake Ida, where he spends most weekends. These names are going to be important later, so make notes.
I am.
But he prefers to fish on the smaller Lake Charlie. Okay?
Okay.
So John and Ben's dad, Carl, got up nice and early and got out of the ice house, and they're fishing over about 16 feet of water. And by 7 a.m., they were into a solid sunfish bite. Just having a good time, yarding them in.
Okay.
And they're small sunfish, but they're having fun. And after a while, they noticed some pike were staging around the panfish school, and they started seeing pike take swipes at the hooked bluegills as they were bringing them up. And
Yep.
Dude, like I know you've been in this situation. Anybody else who's been in this situation knows it's a pretty fun game.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
it's a little
Especially if
sadistic.
you got a camera. It's like a video game. Yeah.
It's definitely a little sadistic. Like you hook in a little fish, and then you're like, "Oh, I got one. I'm gonna let him swim around a little and see if the big pike whacks at him." It's fun. It's fun, right?
Totally.
A little dirty, maybe, but fun. So, and every once in a while, when you're doing that with pike or other big fish, a pike will grab onto one and it won't let go. Or sometimes I've even seen them like fully inhale the smaller fish head first, and then the spines get stuck in their throat. And now you're fighting this big pike on really light tackle.
Yeah.
And it's just a good time. It's a good time. So that's what John and Ben were up to on this particular day. And at some point, John even managed to land a 27-inch pike, which I'm sure was super fun. So that's the scene that's going on. This is what's happening in the ice house.
Okay.
And,
I don't hate anybody yet.
No,
so.
no, they're just having a nice morning of ice fishing and playing God with the food chain. That's what's going on. Then, all of a sudden, their flasher starts sliding across the floor of the ice house, and luckily, it gets wedged in the hole. It's Ben's flasher. Ben grabs a hold of his flasher and he pulls it back a little, and then he and John see a huge fish hanging on to the transducer itself just below the surface. And thinking quickly, Ben lifted up slowly on the transducer cable. The fish's head came up into the hole. John grabbed it behind the gill plate and pulled out a 50-plus inch muskie on the transducer. After they pulled it up, the fish continued to bite down on that transducer. Kuznia told Northland Outdoors, it was honestly a minute and a half before that thing let go. I kind of tickled its mouth, hoping it would open, and it didn't. So, it's a crazy story, but it's so unfair to all the people who have spent years of their lives working their butts off trying to catch a 50-inch muskie. It's so unfair.
Now I understand why you think this would anger me so much, but frankly, it doesn't anger me at all, because this is how this shit happens with muskies. Like,
I know.
I'm convinced that if I'm ever going to catch a 50-plus inch muskie, if that's ever going to happen for me, chances are it's going to be a miracle, because it's going to bite some Hottentot or something that I'm throwing for smallmouth.
Well, so that's crazy enough as it is, but there's one more wrinkle that makes this even more hard to believe. True, but hard to believe. So, and possibly even more unfair, depending on how you want to look at it, because Lake Charlie, the little lake where they're fishing, it's not supposed to have muskies in it. The DNR has never stocked muskies there. It does, however, connect to larger Lake Ida, and you'll remember that's where John has a cabin through a small channel. But the DNR has never stocked muskies in Lake Ida either. They have stocked muskies in Lake Miltona, which connects to the opposite side of Ida from Charlie. So I looked this up on Google Maps, and that fish made just a ridiculous journey, because these are not like tiny little short channels where they connect right next to each other.
Yeah.
We're talking like 50 to 1,000 foot long, super small little skinny water channels, each of which cuts through a culvert under a county road. So this fish went on like a serious walkabout to get there, only to be caught by biting and hanging onto a flasher transducer. And if that story doesn't prove how cruel and callous the fates of fishing are, I do not know what will.
So, okay, a couple things here, right? First of all, I hear you on the walkabout, but and I don't really know what I'm talking about here, but I'm pretty sure muskie grow fairly slowly. So a fish that big, it ain't young, right?
No, it's an old fish.
So that part doesn't freak me out, because if it's that big, it's had a whole lot of time to get to where it ended up.
Yep.
Right? But here's the other thing. If this happened to me, say I was the guy and it bit the transducer and I pulled up this muskie, while I would be like, holy shit, I can't believe that just happened, it would not count as my trophy muskie.
Agreed.
So,
agreed.
And I'm not saying that to take away anything from these guys, but more in the sense of like, well, yeah, every once in a while this goofy stuff happens and here's this impossible fish to catch chewing on a transducer, but like that's still not, even catching one by accident on smallmouth tackle or something, it'd be awesome. I would love it, but I want to catch my big muskie fishing for a big muskie.
Of course.
And you know?
I don't think these guys are claiming like, look at our big muskie. They're telling it because it's just a crazy ass story. And there's even there's one final thing I got to say that I just love how many things had to come together to make this happen. So in the past, John has used a 10-inch auger to drill holes in the ice. Mm-hmm. But he just recently bought a brand new auger with a 9-inch blade. And he was quoted as saying, if I had used my 10-inch auger, your Vexler would be gone.
Well, you know, one last point of note, right? I think the part we're missing here, it's one thing that he's chewing on the transducer cable, but also, man, I know a lot of captains, especially salty guys, that if they're at a certain shallow depth, like say 20 feet of water or less, bottom fishing or whatever it is, they'll kill the sonar, because a lot of people believe that ping, that signal actually screws with the fishing, you know, in certain situations. So it's like another level to me, because here's this thing down there like transmitting. You have to wonder if there was something that tweaked that fish, and like, would it have hit it if it wasn't on, you know, or was like something about that signal put an electromagnetic field in the water or something like that? I don't know.
It's just another one of those things that adds to how mysterious and complex a puzzle it is with what fish will eat and when, and why we can never figure it out, which is why we keep doing it.
Well, I'll have to put some electromagnets on my musky flies or something.
After 3 years of work, our follow-up to the Meat Eater Fish and Game Cookbook is here. It's the Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, campfire, and camp stove. Here is your book for everything that's best cooked or eaten outside. From grilling to open fire cooking to Dutch ovens to smokers to barbecue to backpacking meals to how to pull off the perfect fish fry, with pit stops along the way for lessons about Ice Age cooking methods and the best 5 ways to construct a cooking fire you can be proud of. And of course, we're focusing on wild game and fish here with over 100 recipes, including stuffed venison burgers 3 ways, wild duck with ahi verde sauce, a jerky made with cola, a gin and tonic made with fire-charred lemons, and grilled frog legs made with a sticky sweet sauce. This ain't your normal cookbook, so be prepared to be surprised. Get your copy now. For more info, visit themeateater.com or buy it wherever books are sold.
For the first time, but hopefully not the last time here on Fish News, we're going to shut up and kind of at least pass the mic to our buddy and Meat Eater's fishing editor, Sam Lundgren now. It's kind of like how real news orgs kick it to the guy in the field to bring some more light to a very big story than Miles or I could bring it on our own.
Sam, what's going on, man? Thanks for I don't know, stopping doing real work and coming to talk to us for a little bit.
It's nice to have somebody here besides me and Miles for a change in the news space.
Well, thanks for pulling me away from my real work to talk about some interesting stuff.
I mean, this is technically, we do have you here to talk about your real work because this is one of those stories that we weren't able to cover and shouldn't be covering because it's super regionally focused, and we need to. I mean, fact is, everybody, we needed to bring in the big guns and someone who was a local on this story. Otherwise, we would have looked like a bunch of jerks, really, talking about
this one has to be told by somebody where this hits close to home.
Yeah.
It'd be like Miles telling Striper stories. This just doesn't work.
It just doesn't work. Yeah.
Yeah, well, Miles can always be our Hawaii correspondent.
This is true.
Yeah, we have a lot to cover there. Really, like 2 stories so far, ever? Anyway, with that, Sam's got a really interesting piece for us, and I don't know everything you got, Sam. I know the basics, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you bring.
And just to be clear, this ran on the meateater.com. That's where this all precipitates from.
Yep.
Okay. Sam.
Yeah, so back in December, the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife announced that they aren't going to allow anglers to fish for steelhead out of boats on most of the coastal rivers this season, as well as banning bait and barbed hooks, but that's nothing new. So, as a lot of people are probably aware, native steelhead runs have been in the shitter for the last 4 years. I mean, going back a lot further than that, but like especially bad and predicted to be even shittier this year. And some folks are even speculating that these populations are on the brink of extinction. But WDFW believes that they'll be able to reduce the recreational catch rate by about 50% with these new regulations. But obviously, a lot of people are super pissed about this, especially guides. They had a protest parade through Forks a few weeks ago, and a change.org petition to change these rules has gathered 5,000 signatures. And boats are basically how guided steelhead trips work. The guide rows a drift boat or raft right next to or right on top of the prime holding lies, and clients run through with plugs or drift gear, bobbers and worms, bobber dog rigs, jigs, indicator nymph rigs, you name it. But it's really effective. One study showed that guided anglers on the Sole Duck caught some 80% of the steelhead caught in that river that year. So as you mentioned, I wrote an article about this for the Meat Eater website a few weeks ago, and that got people a bit stirred up. But my message was this.
You're in hiding right now, aren't you?
I am in hiding.
You're in an undisclosed location.
Yeah. We don't know. He's at an Airbnb somewhere.
This is my safe house. Yeah. Witness protection program. But I'm standing by my message, guys. And my message was, think you don't like Washington's new regs? Just you wait until the federal government gets involved. So to take a step back, I caught my first winter run steelhead while skipping class during my senior year of high school up in the Skagit River.
Good choice.
Just 2 months later, the entire Puget Sound distinct population segment of steelhead were listed under the Endangered Species Act. The Skagit didn't reopen for its world famous late winter fishery for a decade, and it's still hit or miss whether or not they'll have a season. And they're probably not going to have one this year. And the Skykomish, the Stillaguamish, the Snoqualmie, and a shitload of other rivers that start with the letter S still haven't been reopened. The Washington coast in the Olympic Peninsula is one of only 4 steelhead metapopulations in the lower 48 that haven't yet come under the umbrella of the feds. Pretty much everything else is listed under the Endangered Species Act already. So there's a lot of different factors at play with why steelhead runs have fallen to fractions of a percent of their historical abundance.
Yeah, we've covered a ton of them on here.
Yeah.
Man. Like that's a frequent news item.
Yeah, absolutely. And people love to speculate wildly about what it is. And one thing's for certain, it's never that person's fault.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
I don't know what's wrong, but it's not me.
Yeah.
It's not me. It couldn't be me.
Having read your story though, like the crux of what you're saying and what, is that as harsh as this is and as upsetting as it is to people, it's better than having the federal government come in and say nothing, no fishing, just shut it down completely.
Exactly. And I mean, the Endangered Species Act is designed to function as, kind of as the iron fist of the federal government slamming down to prevent extinction. It's famously severe. I mean, like, look at the controversy that's been going on around spotted owls for 30 years. But it's also arguably effective if you look at species like wolves that have been recently delisted. But that same severity also makes it an effective deterrent. Like, if you look back at 2015, 11 states and groups as far apart as environmentalists and oil developers and ranchers and hunters came together to design plans to save the greater sage grouse throughout the Intermountain West.
Yeah.
And then later that year, when the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service reviewed the grouse for listing, they ruled them to be, quote, warranted but precluded, which is basically an admission that it's a big problem, but the states are on top of it so they can put their resources elsewhere. So that's exactly what Washington is trying to do with this boat fishing ban. And, after publishing this article, my name is kind of being trashed, like, from the hump tulips to the hoe and back again. But I'm just trying to point this out to people. Like, I don't love this rule either. I have a ton of friends who are guides and I want to see them continue making a living. But and this rule messed up my own plans too. But I'm just really worried that if an ESA listing comes down, this fishery is going to evaporate. And that's not a boogeyman thing. Like, there are some of the litigious wild fish groups have already said that they're going to petition the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service under a more amenable Biden administration to list the coastal steelhead stock. And you know what? They're probably going to get it.
Yeah.
Well, so I just have one question, because see, this is not my world, admittedly, right? I am not as fluent on the West Coast steel scene as you guys are. But before we get into, because we're gonna, I want you to read some of the things people have been saying about you specifically. I believe you've queued up some comments that we'll get into, and this is just a question more out of ignorance. I mean, this system has been in place elsewhere out there for a long time, like the Deschutes. You cannot fish from a boat on the Deschutes.
Most correct? Of the Skeena system, too. Yeah, you're right about the Deschutes and Steelhead Valhalla in around Terrace, British Columbia. Nobody fishes from boats for steelhead and haven't for a long time.
And to clarify, it's not that you can't put a boat on these rivers, you just can't fish out of it. So like I experienced on Deschutes, you can use your boat to go from point A to point B, but then you have to get out and fish, right?
Correct. And that's how a lot of people already do it.
Right.
And there's also a valid argument to be made here that the Bogasheel is not the Deschutes. There's steep banks that are covered in rocks and moss. And it's very dangerous. A lot of the steelhead seasons, the rivers will barely ever come into shape, not be too muddy to fish.
Right.
And so like a lot of people are arguing, like, what about elderly people? What about young people? What about disabled anglers? And like, I get that, man. And originally there weren't concessions for those people, but I have heard that WDFW is changing their tune there, and so that's good to hear, because like I've got buddies out there who are still fishing and rowing people down the rivers in their 70s, and
Right.
and young folks and people who can't walk well. Like I feel like it's very fair that the rules are a little bit different there, but like the fact of the matter is, like, WDFW had to do something. Like, the status quo here has failed, and restricting recreational anglers is the only tool they have available. They can't stop the Japanese high seas trawlers. They can't stop the tribes. They can't stop warm water in the North Pacific. And these rules have been getting more and more restrictive for decades. So like, if you didn't see this coming, or something like this coming, you just haven't been paying attention. The last thing I want to say is kind of where we're coming from here, where I'm coming from here, I suppose, is like, it's a big part of our ethos at Meat Eater to have respect for and deference to biologists and wildlife managers. They have a tough job, and too many hunters and anglers have shit talked them for too long. Like, I'm not happy about this decision, but I understand why it was made, and I hesitate to second guess a game agency that is trying to save a game species from extinction. And there have been public forums and public comment periods throughout all of this process, but very few people were willing to tune in until something happened that they didn't like. So, like, last thing I want to say to anybody who hates me over this is, like, if you don't like this rule, like, get involved in the process and be part of the solution. Yelling at me is not going to accomplish anything. And I just really don't feel like Steelhead owe us anything. Like, but we owe the Steelhead like all we can do to keep them around, and we like definitely owe it to the generations to follow. Like, my best friend, one of my best friends who I've been fishing steelhead with for 15 years, had a son this year, and he is convinced that his son won't be able to fish native steelhead with us on the Olympic Peninsula, and that breaks my heart, man. And I just feel like, you know, at least they're trying, at least some measure of attempt is being made to save these fish.
Yeah, and I think a couple things that we got to throw in here before we close out. One, if you don't know anything about this particular subculture of anglers in this particular area, they might be the most divided and angry group of fishermen that I've ever come across.
Me too.
And that's important for those of you who don't know about this. The other thing is in your article that I read, you know, on some of those systems, all of these fish are getting caught at least once, and some of them are getting caught multiple times. Right, according to the statistics. And I think that's an important point to throw out. It's like the escapement's getting past the nets, but they're all getting caught and released by anglers, and that has an impact. And before we let you go, because we want you to tell us some of the awful hate mail that you've gotten, because we find that entertaining. But I should point out that 3 different friends of mine, after reading your article, reached out to me and like said straight up, like, "Hey man, is Sam okay? Is anyone are people trying to hurt him?" So like, I think before we close out, Sam, why don't you give us an example of the kind of crazy feedback you're getting from people and how upset they are because you were trying to tell this, what I consider to be a journalistic story about the state of things.
Yeah. And, you know, and before I do that, Miles, I am okay. And thanks for asking. But like,
you're okay right now because nobody knows where you are.
Right. Yeah. The safe house. But you know, I heard from one of the top guides out there the other day, and I was totally expecting him to thrash me. And we had a really great conversation about this and found a lot of middle ground. And so I do believe that a lot of rational people are kind of seeing what's happening here in its totality, not just kind of what's in front of their face. And I have gotten more positive comments than negative.
Just read the negative.
Yeah, we were happy to hear that, but we want to hear the train wreck.
So this fella said, "You ever research South American king salmon and how they got there? I mean, really researched it. See, you are spewing propaganda and a rhetoric, ... The simple problem is there aren't brought steelhead. The simple solution, all caps, more steelhead. Furthermore, WDFW is funded 25 to 40% yearly by federal endangered species monies Therefore, they would go bankrupt if wild fish ever came back. Also research the quinault, misspelled. It is amazing how they get awesome returns on all these warm weather years and with all the bad nets. Quinault is the best steelhead fishery in the entire Pacific Northwest. And he closes by saying something distasteful about my friend and employer, Stephen Ranello, that I would rather not repeat.
I think we shouldn't.
Yeah,
we got time for one more. You got one more just short, really cutting, good one, whether the spelling's right or not?
I also got this one. Bullshit. I live in Washington State, and we have hogs for steelhead. I catch them all the time and avoid game officers while I take a picture of them and put them back.
Well, can't argue with that kind of science. That's hashtag facts.
We could spend so much more time reading those shorties because I'm sure there's some good ones. But, dude, it's a great article. It was an important article, and we're happy that you came on to talk to us about it here. I'm also going to say, Phil, that Sam is eligible for a win this week. I think any one of us could win based on the work we've done here, and
I know who I'd vote for, and it wouldn't be me or you, Joe. But Phil, you make your choice.
Agreed. We'll see what Phil has to say, and then we're going to move into trivia with our good buddy, Robert Hawkins.
For obvious reasons, Sam Lundgren, you're the winner of Fish News. But Miles, don't sell your story short. I mean, it had everything. Suspense, mystery, action. Put that all together and...
Baby, you got a stew going.
You gotta be highly skilled for these fucking shows. You understand that?
Yes, I do understand.
Are you well versed there? Are you a very smart man?
Yes, I am.
All right.
Joining us today to play a little trivia, my good buddy, Mr. Robert Hawkins, owner of Bob Mitchell's Fly Shop in St. Paul, Minnesota. Bobby Nachos, as you're known. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm great. How are you guys?
We are doing well. We're going to have a little fun today. So just to fill everybody in, the month was November, the year 2015, when you, sir, caught a 57-inch muskie on Mille Lacs Lake on the fly, claiming the current world record fly caught muskie. And you and I, over the years, have talked about this ad nauseum, and you've talked to so many other people about it. I wouldn't be surprised to hear that you're tired of talking about it. Fair to say?
Yeah.
We're not going to talk about it now either. This is just the jumping off point for your first trivia question today. I hope that you are ready to play. At just north of 132,000 acres, Mille Lacs is the second largest lake in Minnesota, and I'd say it has a pretty solid reputation as a top fishing destination, not just in your home state, but also around the country. Would you agree with that?
Agree, yep.
Okay, so the question is, how many current Minnesota state record fish do you think were plucked from the mighty waters of Mille Lacs? Is it A, 11, B, 4, C, 0, or D, 1?
I'm going to say 4.
4, so you're going low number there. If that's your final answer, that is incorrect. The answer is 0.
Wow.
Presently, there are no state record fish in Minnesota from Mille Lacs, which I found very interesting because it's one of the most heavily fished bodies of water there, and I hear all kinds of good things. But a quick follow-up to that, I happened to notice while doing research that Minnesota's current state record muskie measured 56 inches and weighed 54 pounds and has stood since 1957 from Lake Winnebagosh, and I'm sure you know all about that.
Yep, very much.
But, I mean, dude, technically, you beat that on the fly, and I understand you had no intention of keeping that fish,
yep.
But had you would hold the state record spot right now, would you not?
Potentially. The thing with Minnesota is they do it by weight and not by length.
Right.
And the girth on the Winnebagoshish fish may have outdone my fish by maybe a pound or two. So mine may have been a pound or two short of what that fish weighed, if that makes sense.
Okay, so we'll never know, but the potential definitely exists.
Yeah, I mean, it was...
for Minnesota's state record fish to be fly caught.
Yep.
Okay, that's impressive. Okay. All right, so we'll get off the record fish. We'll go to another video that you were in because there's awesome video of that fish being caught. But there's another clip out there In fact, we used it in the promo video to announce the launch of Bent, in which you were being filmed in the final throes of cleaning a Yeti cooler in which beef jerky sandwiches and other assorted edibles had been marinating with the lid closed for, what was it, 2 months, 2 weeks, something like that?
At least a couple, 3 weeks, but my garage my garage is like 120 degrees in the summer, so maybe 2 weeks at 120 degrees.
2 weeks at 100, and it's jerky sandwiches. Anything? Was there anything else?
Yeah,
notable?
what was in there? I want to know. I want to know what those contents were that created such a putrid
dry
odor.
heaves.
There's always loose potato chips with water sloshing around. There's half spilled beers usually in there. Probably some grapes that we thought we were going to eat to be healthy, but didn't.
I have never heard somebody retch quite like that. We might have to repost that on our socials, Miles.
I think we do. And it sounds to me like a primordial soup. Like you might have actually spawned some new creatures, new life that never before existed on this planet came out of that cooler.
It's so unfortunate. What Aaron missed, that was like the...
He caught the tail end in the video.
It was so much more before that even too.
The point came across.
So this is kind of a goofy little question, but we're all going to learn something from it. So based on that experience, which of the following is not recommended for use in removing foul odor from your cooler? Is it A, charcoal briquettes, B, baby powder, C, cat litter, D, baking soda? Which of those is not recommended for removing incredibly foul odors from a rank, stank cooler?
Bobby, I don't know the answers to these either, so I'm puzzling over this as much as you are.
Nice. Well, I'm gonna say, charcoal's. I'm gonna say cat litter because it probably has some sort of chemical in it that's not supposed to be in your cooler, maybe.
Actually, the made-up one here is B, baby powder. All the rest are recommended, at least on the interwebs, for removing rank odor from your cooler. However, I will say the most common one, the one I see used most, any guesses?
Maybe charcoal.
Bleach?
Bleach.
Oh, no, bleach is disinfecting. We're just talking about, there's, such an embedded stank in there.
Fair enough.
You're just trying to get odor out, not necessarily disinfect. And, yes, charcoal briquettes. So... fun fact, if you ever have a mishap like Mr. Hawkins here, get you some of them Kingsford, fill that sucker up, close the lid, and let it marinate for a few days. Anyway, this has been really fun, and we thank you so much for playing today.
Thank you.
Enthusiasm. That's what we like here on Bent.
Yeah, I think we need to bring back and reshare that video of Hawkins dry heaving over the cooler because it's just so gross and guttural, and yet it's informative. There's a lesson there.
There's a lesson there, but
there's a lesson there.
Yeah, it's a quick lesson at the end. We'll reshare the video this week. Speaking of guttural, right? I once fished a lure that made me make guttural noises. And also made me dry heave, a la Hawkins.
I learned that just this week. Something I learned from this week's End of Line segment. So Joe's going to mimic his good friend Bobby Nachos there, and he's going to get all gross and guttural and informative. He's going to give you some tips on what you should never do when getting into the chopper in the Amazon.
Fishy, 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 fishy!
Well, that's not loud enough, Bert.
Perhaps you're very familiar with the wood chopper. It's also very possible you've never heard of it. I liken this lure to a great band with a devout cult following that tried to get a major label record deal for decades, only to eventually burn out, leaving a smattering of even lesser-known cover bands in its wake. The wood chopper is a topwater hardbait, and while they've been made in many sizes, the 6 to 8 inch models were the most common. The design is rather simple. You've got a painted cigar-shaped body, and at the tail, between that body and the rear treble hook, is an oversized metal double-blade propeller. Like many baits featured here, there is some haze and murk to the story of the wood chopper, but my research points to it being an original creation of Ozark Mountain Lures. It debuted in the 1950s and was primarily marketed as a musky bait. Ozark's design actually featured a propeller at the head and the tail. And while there's not tons of info on the interwebs about these early versions, I get the sense that aside from catching muskies, these topwaters became sleepers, if you will, for giant largemouth bass as well. The wood chopper was designed to be versatile. You could steadily reel one in, making those blades buzz and the body wake. You could slow roll a chopper to create a lazy bubble trail, or you could violently snap a wood chopper to make a rip-saw racket on the surface. And it's that last dance move that pushes our story forward. The wood chopper's design has arguably inspired and influenced many other successful baits, perhaps most notably the Whopper Plopper. But just as my beloved Misfits inspired bands like Metallica that would go on to have platinum records and make millions of dollars, the wood chopper by itself never really achieved superstardom. Still, Lure Jensen owner Phil Jensen saw potential and purchased the wood chopper design from Ozark Mountain Lures in 1991. Once Lure Jensen took over, they quickly got rid of that front propeller. In the late 80s and early 90s, peacock bass fishing in the Amazon was getting more and more attention from American anglers. And what they learned was that the sound of a wood chopper being jerked across the surface in Mach 1 bursts created an auditory kill cue for monster peacocks better than anything else. Now, I'm guessing here, but removing the front prop created less resistance, allowing early pioneers to rip those choppers a little harder and a little faster. Shortly after Lure Jensen purchased the wood chopper, an angler by the name of Doc Lawson broke the all-tackle world record for peacocks with a 27-pounder using the lure. In short order, a Lure Jensen wood chopper became standard kit for Amazon peacock hunters looking for big dogs. In fact, as one piece I read suggested, if you showed up in the Amazon without wood choppers, you were labeled a complete novice. Throughout the 90s and into the early 2000s, between the rise of the internet and more lodge operations opening in South America, peacock fishing in the Amazon slowly morphed from a game for the rich and fortunate to pretty affordable to more people. And the wood chopper's reputation as the trophy peacock lure only strengthened. But it didn't strengthen enough, apparently. In 2006, Phil Jensen sold his entire company to Rapala, and by 2011, the Lure Jensen wood chopper was out of production, because despite the lure's prominence in the peacock scene, the small market of Amazon-bound anglers simply generated too little money to justify its place in the catalog, and by then, it seemed nobody was really using a wood chopper for anything but peacock bass. I finally got to the Amazon in 2015, and sure enough, there wasn't a Lure Jensen wood chopper anywhere in sight. But as it often goes with defunct plugs, a small batch maker steps in to fill the void. The lodge I stayed at set us up with rip rollers, pretty much carbon copies of wood choppers made by High Roller Lures out of Gainesville, Florida. Now, having spent years watching videos of massive peacocks crushing choppers, I couldn't wait to fish them. But then I did a very dumb thing. My first night at the lodge, me and the fellas got our drank on, and we failed to drink any water between the adult bevs. So, the next morning, while my excitement overrode any hangover, and I was pretty bright-eyed and bushy-tailed when I made my first cast, with a rip roller and started chugging, things took a turn. "Harder, sir," is all our guide said. So, I ripped that lure harder. "More hard, sir," he said after my second retrieve. And that's when I realized to work a roller or chopper like you're supposed to, you're going to burn out the arms and shoulders. Now, normally I'd say bring the pain. But within an hour, the remnant booze, dehydration, and 110-degree heat at the equator caught up to me, and I about collapsed. With my head spinning, I slugged 3 waters back-to-back and then fought to keep those down, and then I think I just kind of laid on the deck for a good long while until I recovered. Lesson learned about hard liquor in the Amazon. And side note, I fished that rip roller right proper for the rest of the trip. And while I stuck a couple, my biggest peacock, a 13-pounder, hit a big storm chug bug, which I probably could have worked effectively being like full-blown Lemmy drunk.
So that's all the time we have this week. If you happen to just fast forward through the entire show and get to this very spot, you missed a deep dive into Carl Weathers that A&E's biography could not touch with a 10-foot surf rod.
Oh, man, you sure did. But listen, don't miss out on your chance to be on this show. Keep those bar nominations, sale bin items, and awkward photos rolling into bent@themeateater.com. Remember, if we use anything you send, you will get a sweet little care package of stickers from us.
Or just say hi. Mm-hmm. Right in. Say what's up, or you guys suck, whatever you want. And don't forget, we got eyes on those Degenerate Angler and Bent podcast hashtags. You can get stickers if you grab our attention that way too.
Yeah. And once you realize your minimal fishing successes aren't producing a Graham-worthy shot that catches our attention,
You're going to give that shit up? You're going to concentrate on golf.
Finally. I've been waiting for a Happy Gilmore reference this entire episode.
After 3 years of work, our follow-up to the Meat Eater Fish and Game Cookbook is here. It's the Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, campfire, and camp stove. Here is your book for everything that's best cooked or eaten outside. From grilling to open fire cooking to Dutch ovens to smokers to barbecue to backpacking meals to how to pull off the perfect fish fry, with pit stops along the way for lessons about Ice Age cooking methods and the best 5 ways to construct a cooking fire you can be proud of. And of course, we're focusing on wild game and fish here with over 100 recipes, including stuffed venison burgers 3 ways, wild duck with ahi verde sauce, a jerky made with cola, a gin and tonic made with fire-charred lemons, and grilled frog legs made with a sticky sweet sauce. This ain't your normal cookbook, so be prepared to be surprised. Get your copy now. For more info, visit themeateater.com or buy it wherever books are sold.